Hello and welcome back to 3 News Now. I'm Stephanie Haney. It's Friday, August 28th. This is your afternoon edition with the top headlines from WKYC.com and our WKYC app. Thanks for joining me here to get all filled in on what's impacting you here in Northeast Ohio. Here's what we're going to cover this afternoon. Today is the 57th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, as there is a March on Washington happening today in Washington, D.C. We'll celebrate that by revisiting Dr. King's speech and tell you where you can see the full thing. The NBA playoffs are back on. We'll tell you what we know about that. We'll give you the latest COVID-19 numbers from the Ohio Department of Health here in Ohio, and also give you a recap of what Governor Mike DeWine said yesterday on school reporting of COVID-19 cases, tell you what the Big Ten is thinking about football, and a reminder that it's our WKYC Game of the Week, while also asking you to tell us how you are celebrating your school spirit, even if you can't be in the stadium at your local high school football game tonight. First up, today is the 57th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and we do have that full text on WKYC.com. As we are celebrating that in Washington, D.C. today, thousands of people are participating in the Action Network's Commitment March called Get Your Knee Off Our Necks, also known as the 2020 March on Washington. This is in response to multiple killing of black people at the hands of police officers recently, as well as racial injustice and inequity across the United States. So the rally is taking place, as we said, on the 57th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. The I Have a Dream speech is considered one of the pivotal moments of the civil rights movement, and some historians have rated it as the top American speech of the 20th century. Here are just a few lines from Dr. King's speech. It was 57 years ago when he said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." He went on to say, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And as he went on, he added, "This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning, 'My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring." If you'd like to revisit Dr. King's full speech, you can see that on WKYC.com and in our WKYC app. Now, this is all happening today in Washington, D.C. against the backdrop of multiple protests after police shot Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin in the back, who is a black man, and the video shows white police officers involved in that shooting. The NBA postponed playoff games this week. Well, those are kicking back up on Saturday. This is based on an agreement between the league and the National Basketball Players Association. And part of that agreement that made them comfortable to get back on the court was to immediately establish a social justice coalition that will focus on criminal justice reform. This coalition will be made up of players, coaches, and owners, and it will focus on issues like voting access and advocating for meaningful police and criminal justice reform. Team owners who also control the arena property where their teams play will work with local officials to turn those buildings into a voting location for the 2020 general election to allow for safe in-person voting. While it's definitely a concern, many of the typical polling places like schools and senior centers won't be available as in-person voting locations this November. We do know that Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse here in Cleveland will be a polling location here in downtown Cleveland. Also, the league and the players will be working with TV networks to create advertising spots during the remainder of the playoffs to promote greater engagement in the election process and in their community. So that's the latest news out of the NBA related to the playoffs. Now we've got those updated numbers for you related to COVID-19 here in the state of Ohio, and we have seen in the last 24 hours the largest daily increase in new cases in the past 2 weeks. We are up almost at 1,300 new cases. Today, in the last 24 hours, we've seen 1,296 new reported cases of COVID-19. That brings the total number that we've seen here in Ohio dating back to March to now 120,124 cases. Now, the Ohio Department of Health reports that about 83% of those are presumed to be recovered, so about 17% presumed to be active, just under 20,000 presumed to be active or not recovered. Of course, that would include people who have lost their lives related to COVID-19. Our latest positivity rating is also up. This is data from August 26th. That's at 5.7%. So that's above the World Health Organization recommended threshold of 5%. But our 7-day rolling average is still below it. That's at 4.4%. So for all of the COVID-19 tests that are being done over the last 7 days, the average is 4.4% of those are coming back positive. In the last 24 hours, we have seen a slight decrease in new reported deaths. There were 29 new deaths reported, bringing that total number now to 4,105 COVID-19 deaths here in Ohio. We saw 71 new hospitalizations in the last 24 hours. That's down from yesterday. There are currently 800 people who are actively hospitalized. That is up from yesterday. And of those 800 people who are in the hospital, 271 of them are in the intensive care unit. So about 34% of all people hospitalized right now are in the ICU. We saw 17 new ICU admissions in the last 24 hours. Now let's take a look at the national and the global numbers for COVID-19. These come from Johns Hopkins University. In the U.S., there are now a total of 181,186 deaths related to COVID-19. That's 937 deaths in the last 24 hours. And the U.S. total number of cases is now at 5,889,652. Now, here's your reminder that the U.S. has about 4.25% of the global population, but our cases and our deaths far outpace that. We have 24% of the known COVID-19 cases in the world and 22% of the known deaths in the world. Globally, there are now been 833,239 reported COVID-19 deaths and 24,551,207 reported COVID-19 cases. Governor Mike DeWine, in his press conference yesterday, as students go back to school, talked about establishing a COVID-19 reporting system. So here's what will happen in the schools across Ohio, across Northeast Ohio, but across all of Ohio. After learning of a student or a staff member testing positive, K-12 schools must report that case to the local health department as quickly as possible. Now, that's a little bit tricky with medical information because you're not going to be able to give any personally identifiable information, but it is important that this information gets out there. DeWine said that there is a need for consistency in the reporting. Here's what he said yesterday. The way these are reported to the public should be, whether it's in Belmont County or Huron County or Hamilton County, it should be the same way. Frankly, I felt it needs to be consistent. It needs to be reported to the health department, obviously, but it needs to be also in real time reported to parents so that parents have an idea what's going on, and then it needs to also be reported to the news media. So here's what Governor Mike DeWine is laying out, and there will be an order forthcoming on this. Schools should make information about a positive case publicly available and should notify parents or guardians in writing about the case, including as much information as possible without disclosing any protected health information. Of course, that's a major limitation. The local health department will then notify the Ohio Department of Health on a weekly basis about new reported cases in schools, as well as cumulative case information for students and teachers. And here's the big thing. This will be posted every Wednesday on coronavirus.ohio.gov, so more access to information for all of the people in Ohio. There is a lot of information on coronavirus.ohio.gov. We break it down for you, and you can find that as well on WKYC.com. Just kind of wading through it a little bit and organizing it so it might be a little bit easier to understand. That's what we try to do for you. Now, as we are talking about Friday being a big football day, of course, for high school sports, the Big Ten is now looking at options for football. That's including a possible Thanksgiving start. They're looking at multiple potential options for a football season. This comes from Ohio State spokesperson Jerry Amig. He confirmed this to our sister station down in Columbus, 10 TV WBNS. So one of the options is to start playing the week of Thanksgiving. That was first reported by CBS Sports and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Emig said other options have been discussed as well, such as starting around New Year's Day or in January, but nothing has been decided. That's something that we have heard in the past. Ohio State Athletics Director Gene Smith had talked about a January start as well. The university is actively planning, according to Athletic Director Smith, for winter and spring seasons for fall sports. So there is a hope that those sports will be able to be played just later. Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields is the person who started that online petition asking the Big Ten to reinstate the season. But when that happened, the Big Ten said, no, we are not starting football in the fall. It's just not going to happen. What is happening tonight, though, is our WKYC Game of the Week. That is back, and that will be tonight between Brecksville, Broadview Heights, and Aurora. So the Bees will take on the Greenmen, and our DINO DENATALE will be there calling it live from the stadium. And then after that, he'll be joined by our very own Tyler CAREY for post-game coverage. That will all be starting at 6:50 p.m. on WKYC.com, our WKYC app, on Facebook Live, and on YouTube. So make sure you check that out. One more question for you before we go. There's a lot of high school football fans here in Northeast Ohio. I just tweeted out a question. I want to know from you, how are you going to show your school spirit even though you can't be at the stadium, because it's such a limited number of people who can be at the stadiums tonight, and Friday night football is a big part of our lives here in Northeast Ohio. So please reply to my tweet. Let me know how you're showing your school spirit, how you're letting your team know that you still support them, even though you can't necessarily be in the stadium. That's at _Stephanie Haney. And your comment might just make it on What's New Tonight at 5 p.m. That's coming up next for me. I'll have your trending stories there in Clicking in Cleveland, and also reactions to what people are doing in order to show their school spirit today when you can't necessarily be in the stadium. And then I'll see you back here on Monday for 3 News Now. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I know we have a little bit of rain potentially coming our way, but hopefully there's some sunshine at least coming on Sunday. At least that's what I'm looking forward to. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, as I said, and I'll see you back here next week. I'm Stephanie Haney.